Hello and welcome to another interview. In this episode, we'll be interviewing Miss Anderson Heller of Lynfred Winery. Do you care to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Christina Anderson Heller. I am the marketing director at Lynfred Winery, and I've been with the winery since March of 2000.
Excellent. So could you give a quick introduction of the history of this facility?
Absolutely. So we actually became a bonded winery here in the state of Illinois in 1977, and we opened in October 1979 to the public. But the story itself, so our name, Lynfred, is actually the combination of Lynn and Fred Kohler. They were the people who started the winery. They were a couple who were in hospitality industry. They both came from winemaking families. In fact, Fred Kohler, his family came from Germany, and for over 300 years, they made wine in Germany, and they came here around the turn of the 19th century and settled in what is now the O'Hare Airport, but was known as Des Plaines now, and they would make wine and sell it. They even sold wine during Prohibition. And the family just grew up making wine. He grew up making wine, and they kind of turned their hobby into a business.
I'm assuming that this information, how the wine is made, has been passed on from generation to generation.
It has, yes, it has. And you know what's really interesting about it is, and I know that you interview a lot of different people, but what makes us truly interesting is that we don't grow any of our own grapes. We're a completely urban winery, have been since day one. We have, contracts, which we can talk about, contracts with different vineyards throughout the United States and Chile as well. And we bring all of our wine here, or all the grapes. We bring all the grapes here, and we actually do 95% of the production is whole cluster production. So, we're not bringing in a lot of juice. We're bringing in whole fruit and processing it all right here in Roselle, Illinois. We're about 45 minutes outside of, actually more like 25, 30 minutes outside of Chicago.
Excellent. So where would the wine grapes be sourced from, specifically which states?
Sure. So we get the majority of our grapes, as you can probably imagine, from California. We get our grapes from the Lodi region. We particularly really love using what was once Bora Vineyards in Lodi. They were the first winery to ever have a tasting room in Lodi. But now Marcus Wine Company, who was their winemaker, Bora, the gentleman, has passed on. So Marcus Wine Company, he's a gentleman named Marcus from Austria. We buy a lot of our grapes from him. We buy a lot of grapes from the Sacramento River Delta of California, from Herringer Estates Vineyards. They are a 5-generation Dutch family farm and vineyard. And we also buy a lot of grapes from Washington, from the Columbia Valley, Snake River area, and Kamiak Vineyards and Jones's Vineyards up there. And then we also get some grapes from Chile, because our two winemakers, Andres Basso and Rodrigo Gonzalez, are from Chile. And so we have a lot of contacts there. And for them, instead of grapes, we're bringing in the juice, not the wine. We're bringing in the juice from Chile.
I see. So I'm assuming that even with the drought going on in California, due to all the different sources you're drawing from, you're not too much affected by this sort of situation.
Exactly. So, it's kind of like a scale back and forth. You have your positive and your negative. I really consider it to be a positive, because of the fact that we're able to purchase grapes. We're not stuck with, for instance, if there's a, bad harvest, we aren't stuck to that contract. So, we're able to buy the best fruit, the best grapes, because we also make fruit wines, which we can talk about later. But one of the negatives is we do have to pay for trucking and transportation. And as you could imagine, this harvest coming up after the summer, this fall is probably going to be quite pricey because of the gas prices, because, we're bringing in the grapes from, we work with trucking systems to bring them from California and Washington to Chicago.
Which brings me to another question. 2020 to 2022 has been really bad years. 2020 has been the apex of the pandemic situation.
Sure.
and 2021 to 2022, and part of 2020 as well, have all seen supply chain problems throughout the entire situation. So how have you dealt with that in terms of grapes? Have you focused more on trying to get more local grapes from Illinois or closer
You
states?
know, the majority of our grapes we're still getting from California, Washington. We haven't really had any problem with them. We had a little delay in 2021 getting them to us a little bit, but the good thing is that, well, and unfortunately for Illinois, we don't buy a lot of Illinois grapes. And the reason why is there are a lot of vineyards here, but they're smaller vineyards. And we have a large wine club, about 5,000 people, and we produce new wines for those clubs every single month. So by doing that, we need a certain amount of wine to supply our wine club. And unfortunately, the Illinois vineyards don't produce enough for the amount that we need. So we really rely on primarily our West Coast contacts as well as Chile. Like I said, we had a little bit of a delay. Our main issue wasn't necessarily with grapes in 2021. Our main issue was with, for instance, we bought a new bottling line from Milan, Italy, and that took a very long time to get here. And then along with that, because of COVID, we couldn't get anybody here to, help calibrate it, get it started, teach our crew how to run it. So that was a big issue. As far as packaging issues have been problems. The craziest thing we had the hardest time getting a hold of, we needed to create seating areas outside and we couldn't buy darn tables anywhere. Tables and chairs were the hardest thing to get a hold of because restaurants and everybody was clamoring for them. So, there's been some shipping chain issues that have maybe dealt with our labels, but grapes haven't really been an issue for us.
Thank you. I've also seen, if I remember correctly, you're buying stuff from, I believe, Ohio and Pennsylvania.
I'm sorry, what was that? Could you repeat that?
If I remember you saying it correctly, or may have misheard, you're purchasing from Ohio and Pennsylvania as well, correct?
No, we do not from Ohio or Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, those are two states we can't even ship to. Pennsylvania is a state-run, so we cannot ship any wine there. And Ohio, we can't ship any wine to Ohio either. So no, we aren't getting any grapes from them, just primarily West Coast. We get some fruit. We get some fruit from kind of all over the country, wherever the fruit is grown. We get a lot of cherries from up in Door County, Wisconsin, but that is so close. It's never really been an issue.
I apologize, I must have misheard.
No worries. Bottles, getting bottles, corks have been hard to get. I think our shipping issues where we've really seen the thing is everything else besides the grapes.
So how are you dealing with those situations? Have you found any more local bottlers and whatnot?
We actually have our own bottling line. We have two bottling lines now. The new one was an upgraded one that's allowing us to do some screw caps, some single like 187 size bottles. So we kept our older bottling line as well because those Italian pieces of equipment, they're all Prospero. They're beautiful pieces. And as long as you keep up with them, they kind of last forever. So we were able to continue to use our older bottling line, even while we couldn't get that new one running. So the main thing that it held us up with not being able to get that new bottling line going was we were really hoping to get our 187 sized wines out a little bit quicker, but we just have started bottling those and some screw cap wines for summer, which is a lot of fun.
All right, on to the fruit wine, I guess. When it comes to making fruit wine, is there any major differences in the production of fruit wine versus, say, grape wine?
Yes, the first thing would be sugar. So for the fruit wines, I actually was just today I posted about rhubarb wine on our social media. And rhubarb, well, it's technically a fruit. San Francisco Chronicle did an article on us about probably 10 years ago on our rhubarb wine. And they did a whole thing about, fruit wines and pineapple wine from Hawaii, rhubarb from us, and cherry wine from Wisconsin. And the main thing is what we've always said is, it's like a computer. You put bad things in, you're going to get bad things out. So as long as we start with really good fruit, just like with a bottle of wine, you're going to get a good bottle of wine. But the problem is with fruit, you do need sugar. You definitely, especially like with strawberry wine, you have to add sugar to it. Same with the rhubarb. But other than that, it's almost done like a red wine production in a way, because for us, we're usually buying the whole fruit. If it's not the whole fruit, it's the frozen fruit. We let it macerate and begin to ferment in the tanks. Like actually on the whole fruit themselves. When we get apricots, it smells like heaven in here. It's like, because we get tons and tons of apricots, and we crush the apricots and we put them into the tank and we let them sit there with some yeast on it, and then we let it begin its fermentation. So just like a red wine, sits there on the skins, our fruit wines sit there on the whole fruit before we do the pressing out of it. So it's intriguingly similar, but actually fruit wines, I would say, and I think our winemakers will tell you, are probably the hardest things to make out there, to capture that delicate flavor. With wine, I think wine is subjective in what you expect to taste, what you expect to smell. Petit Syrah, or for instance, like Merlot, you're always expected to probably smell cherries in Merlot, but if you smell a cherry wine, you expect to smell cherries. And so, if you get different things, you've got to make sure it definitely smells like the fruit itself and tastes.
So how is that modified to make it happen? How do you modify the conditions to make sure that apricot smell remains stable within the wine?
I think it's primarily by, getting that really good fruit to begin with. And again, that's when your really great winemakers come into hand right there. We have our lab down in the cellar for a reason. They're able to keep constant contact on it, to keep an eye on it, make sure it's going well. Those fruit wines are made pretty fast, which is nice. We're looking at like 3 to 6 months to make a fruit wine. They're all done in the stainless steel tanks. For a while, we tried doing some of the apple and stuff like that in barrels years ago. But, they kind of keep them, we like to keep them in the stainless steel tanks to capture that natural fruitiness. So we aren't putting in an oak, which of course would change it. So I think that's one of the ways we stick with keeping the aromas and the true fruit characteristic to it.
All right, one more question. I do know that different wine style influence have been popularized in different parts of the world. Which type of wine style? Italian, French, Romanian? Which type of wine style do you make?
So our winemakers, because they're from Chile, I always like to say they really have a lot of that South American influence. Lots of vibrant fruit. We have some of ours that kind of swing to a little bit old world, and then you get some of those new worlds. But we have some nice big reds, but they aren't going to be those oaks, the oaky ones that knock you down. Our winemakers really like to keep that, fruit forward characteristic, that South American kind of Latin style to it. And I think that's what we capture the best. And I think just about anybody that you talk to in our wine club will tell you the same. We always have that really beautiful forward fruit characteristics. So you're actually, you're tasting a Syrah, but you get those beautiful nuances of the oak and of the, different aging, ways that we age and ferment. But I think I would call ours fruit forward South American style.
Just to build upon that, for anybody that's not knowledgeable about Chilean style wine, what characterizes the Chilean style wine?
Well, so, I do think, again, they're really sticking with a lot of that really fruit forward flavors and characteristics. You're playing on the characteristics of the grape itself. We also do some fun blending. That's what our winemakers really like to do, some fun blending. And I think by doing that, you're capturing the best of, you're trying to bring out the best characteristic of the wine itself.
Thank you. 2 more questions. Sorry, before we finish. The first one would be, you seem to have a fair amount of fruit wines on tap, as well as a bunch of our different styles of wine being produced, like port and whatnot. Uh,
Yes.
is there any goal to expand further? Maybe expand to different types of fruit, more different types of fruit wine, or are you just going to sort of master what you have right now even further?
Well, if you asked our winemakers, they'll always tell you they're always willing to try something new. But something that's really interesting about us, we've had quite a few people tell us that quite possibly we make more varieties of wine than any winery in the U.S. under one brand. We make anywhere between 80 to 100 different kinds of wine. We do everything from Alicante Boucher, to Syrahs, to Petit Verdot, Tempranillos, Tannat, Zinfandel Chardonnays, Vermentino, Viognier. So we have all those beautiful Vitis vinifera that you know, but then we also do about 2,000 gallons of sparkling wine a year. And the sparkling wine, we do like a classic Brut style. We also do a Brut Rosé. We do a little bit more effervescent rosé. We've actually been doing some frizzante wines, kind of that Italian style with just a little bit of fizz. And those have been extremely popular. We did a sangria frizzante, and we also did a Moscato frizzante, very, very popular, especially to those that like a little bit of sweet and fizz. And we also, of course, make port wines. Just the other night, we make a Ruby Reserve that's made from Sangiovese and Cabernet. But I tried our cherry port the other night. It's called Cherivino, and it blew my mind. It almost tastes like a chocolate covered cherry, but it's not. Oh, it's not like sweet, like sugar sweet. It's so well balanced. I think our port wines have this really cool balance, and that's all wines need to have that balance of acidity and pH, and they just have that nice balance. And with fruits, I mean, my gosh, I think we're doing everything from mango to rhubarb to cherry and raspberry. So I don't know that they'll be taking on any others at this point. We have two sangrias. So, but I never say never, because they're always willing to try something new and fun. We've talked about dipping our feet into some distilled spirits, but you have to deal with liquor laws here in Illinois, which are kind of a nightmare. So maybe at some point you might see some distilled spirits from us.
Thank you. And now for our final question for this video. Normally, I just sort of ask you to give promotion of yourself in about 2 to 4 minutes. So this is like an elevator pitch. Pitch your company to the audience in 2 to 4 minutes.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Lynfred Winery, opening up in 1979 in the suburb of Chicago in Roselle. People have no idea that a winery would exist, especially in the Chicago suburbs, let alone outside of California. And, over 40 years later, we have grown respect and with tradition and excellence in winemaking. We started with Fred and Lynn Kohler, who were the owners and the creators. That's where we got our name, Lynfred, and started in a beautiful home that was built back in 1912. And we kicked off with winning in 1985. We won Best of Show out in California at the Harrah's International. We won Best of Show 2 months later at the National Restaurant Show with the same Chardonnay. And winemakers were coming up to us saying, "What are you doing in Illinois? Why aren't you out in California?" And Fred always said, "Chicago has the wine drinkers. Chicago's the number 2 wine consuming city in the nation, number 3 maybe." So he knew he had the wine consumers here. So while we can't necessarily grow the grapes here in Chicagoland, we can get the best grapes and we can bring the best winemakers to us. So we are lucky enough to have 2 fabulous Chilean winemakers, Andres Basso and Rodrigo Gonzalez. They've worked for some of the finest wineries in Chile. They've worked out in Napa, Washington, Virginia. And they come here and they're making over 80 different kinds of wine. And we have people from all over the world that come in and are just blown away. It's a big, beautiful building that we added on with Governor Thompson back in 1990s, groundbreaking. And we have a 24,000 square foot addition that houses not only our tasting room, but we also have a 4-suite bed and breakfast. We have a beautiful winemaking facility. And we also have tasting rooms in Wheaton, Wheeling, Naperville, and we just opened our newest one up in Highland Park, which is Chicago's North Shore. So I think what's amazing about visiting Lynfred Winery is knowing that great wine can be made anywhere, so long as you have a great product to begin with, and you have a great team of staff and winemakers. And you got to come to outside Chicago. We're only 20 minutes from O'Hare. It's a fantastic visit, lynfredwinery.com.
Thank you. I think that will conclude
Sure.
this video, and thank you for coming over.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for talking about a little bit of Lynfred wine today.
Thank you.